Hello, everyone. Welcome to Her Story Unscripted. I'm so honored to have Christina here. Christina was actually on my previous podcast, and I looked it up, and it was almost 3 years ago, March of 2023. And so much has happened in your life. But one of the things that I really wanted to have you on again, not only because you've been through a lot, but your story has always just been inspiring to me. I think you and I had met and you were on the podcast around influencers and, that world and how you've navigated that. And you also have gone through three deaths with little children and babies and all of that. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to that, that is an incredible story in itself. But you've gone through a lot in the past 3 years and you still show up. And I know you probably have your ups and downs in life, but you've always stood out as someone inspiring to me. And I was like, I have to have her back on the podcast and hear all about what you've been up to and how you've navigated such a hard time in your life again. So Christina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it has been quite an adventure. So much has happened since I was on the podcast last. So I guess for your audience, if they want to go back and listen, we did talk about my boys in the previous podcast, but since then we have navigated so much more. Um, how November of 2024, November of 2024, we received a pretty life-altering diagnosis for Kurtis. It was just a normal weekend. We dropped Addie off at my mom's for we did weekly date nights. And we dropped my mom off at Addie's and went to sushi. And Kurtis just randomly got sick. And I thought he had the flu. And that weekend, he just seemed a little off. He said he was tired. He was sick, like stomach flu type sickness. And he said he just felt, kind of off, kind of tired. That was Friday night. Saturday, I noticed that he was like walking a little weird, but he said he was just tired. And it each day was, a little, there was just things that seemed a little off. And I had said I wanted him to go to the doctor, and he said no, he didn't feel, he was just tired. And he went to work Monday morning, and my gut just said that something was wrong. And Tuesday, I tried to get him to go to the doctor, and he would not go. And Tuesday night, he put our daughter to bed, which he did every night. And he said her bedtime prayers, and they did not make sense. Mm-hmm. And of course, she was little and she didn't notice anything, but I did. And when we came out of the bedroom, I said, something is wrong. And my background is in senior care. I was the executive director for a senior living community for quite a while. And I said, I'm not trying to be mean, but you are showing signs of somebody who possibly had a stroke. And I said, we need to go to the doctor. And he's like, no, I'm fine. And we went to bed that night. And Wednesday morning, I said, we need to go to the doctor. And he's like, no, I have to go to work. They need me, blah, blah, blah. And I said, if something is wrong, like, you're not going to be any good to anybody. Like, we need to go to the doctor. And he's like, no, I have to go to work. And he went to work, and all day I felt sick to my stomach. Like, I knew something was wrong. And I had called my mom, and I was like, I have to get him to go to the doctor. Like, I know something is wrong. And so I brought my daughter to my mom's house. And when he came home, I was like, we need to go. Like, I'm hoping they just tell me that I'm crazy, but like something is off and we need to go. And he said, okay. And we went to the ER, and the doctor's like, why are you here? And he was like, I don't know, I'm fine. And I told the doctor everything that I had been noticing. And I went back to, Friday and told him the symptoms. And the doctor was like, sometimes when men show these symptoms, it could be a UTI. And I was like, oh, I knew that. Like I worked in senior care, like I knew that. And then I was like, oh, he just has a UTI, duh, it's easy. And they ran a bunch of tests and the doctor came in and said, I'm sorry, but we found this massive brain tumor. And we are going to transfer him immediately to San Francisco. They started him on steroid and sent him to San Francisco and did a biopsy because they suspected that it was cancer, but they had to do the biopsy first. And sure enough, it was glioblastoma, which is brain cancer. And where his tumor was located, it and how infiltrated his brain, the tumor had it in his brain, it was not operable. So with glioblastoma, even if they could have surgically removed the tumor, it's not a matter of if it comes back, it's when. So best case scenario, with chemo and radiation and removal of the tumor, we were looking at maybe 5 years. We chose chemo and radiation, even without surgically removing it, kind of as a Hail Mary. Kurtis was young, he was 44, in perfect health. Other than that, he never even got a cold. He ran for fun. He rode his bike to work every day just because he wanted to. And so given his medical history, we thought that we should try. I thought we should try. And so we did. We did one round of chemo and radiation, and the cancer was contained. It didn't spread anymore, which was good given how aggressive glioblastoma is. But unfortunately, that wasn't enough. And from date of diagnosis until date of death was 4 months. Glioblastoma is very aggressive. And his was, it had spread pretty much to his entire brain. It was a miracle that he wasn't showing any symptoms prior to that weekend. What the oncologist and the neurosurgeon believed was that the swelling had gotten so bad, and that's why he started to show symptoms. Typically, they find the brain cancer because people are having headaches or seizures or losing balance. And remarkably, he wasn't having any symptoms prior to that. Or maybe not. Maybe if we could have caught it earlier, we could have.
I was going to say, like, how long do you think that he had it, and what was it that triggered it? But that would make sense that it like swelled up, and which
Yeah,
gave
the
him symptoms.
swelling. I believe now that he may have started noticing some symptoms in July.
Mm.
There are things now that I see that I didn't see at the time. And Kurtis kept a journal, and he did write down a few times that something felt off, but he wasn't sure what.
Mm.
And the first time he mentioned that was in July. Our son left for the police academy in July, and I went with him to move into his apartment that he was going to be living in during the police academy. And Kurtis didn't go, and he had mentioned in his journal that we had taken Tommy to Chico and that he had stayed here, that he was feeling really tired and off, and something felt off in his brain, but he wasn't sure what that was. And so I believe that he started to feel different in July, but he didn't know what that was. So, and then there was just other things that now make sense, that just you just chalk up to everyday life, to work and small children and being busy, that now I see, that I just didn't pay attention to much at the time.
And I feel like men are so like you were saying, it took him a few days to even go to the doctor because they're like, it's
Mhm.
fine, it's fine. You're like, no, something's off. And it always takes them so long to be like, okay, yeah, let me go get help.
And just even like other things too, like that the kids and I have talked about after, like my birthday was in October. The diagnosis was in November, and he always made such a big deal out of holidays. He made everything so special. And every birthday of mine, he would like decorate the house. He would go over the top with gifts. And he had been asking me like what I wanted to do for my birthday. And I was like, nothing, nothing. I don't want anything. I don't need anything. Like if I want something, I buy it. Like it was not a big deal. And he didn't do anything for my birthday. And this was the first time in 10 years he didn't do anything for my birthday. And I didn't think anything of it because I had said over and over and over that I didn't want anything. I didn't need anything for my birthday. And so I didn't think anything of it until after. And I was like, that wasn't him, that he would have never not done anything for my birthday.
Yeah.
But I think after the fact, think about it, like he didn't think about it, or like because he after it seems like after the diagnosis, I started noticing his short-term memory was gone. And so I still play this game where I think how long has his short-term memory been gone, and how much was just he memorizing, or how much was long-term memory, because his long-term memory was intact. They told him he had brain cancer or that he wasn't going to work, and he couldn't retain that information, which almost was a blessing in disguise. He knew who we all were. He knew, he could tell you dates and things from the past, but he had no short-term memory.
Wow. In that 4 months, like, what was life like? Was he able to, like, was he, bedridden, or was he able to like go out and do things? What was like?
He declined very, very quickly.
Mm.
So the day we went to the ER, he drove himself to work and home. He went in, they took him to UCS to, now I can't remember, we've had so many hospitals. He went to San Francisco to CPMC and had the brain biopsy. And it seems like once they messed with the tumor, from there on out, he declined. Like he had trouble walking. His balance was really bad. He ended up having 2 massive seizures. He ended up with a pulmonary embolism. He declined very, very quickly. The chemo and the radiation did a number on his body. So he really didn't walk much again. Maybe with my assistance, he could walk a little bit for maybe the first 2 weeks that he was home. But I mainly provided all care for him.
And he was at home though during that
He
time.
was at home. He was in and out of the hospital quite a bit. But he was mainly at home. With the brain biopsy, he spent like 4 days in the hospital. And then after the seizures, he spent a few days in the hospital, but he was mainly at home. And then when we found out about the blood clot, he was in the hospital for a few days, and then we brought him home. And after that is when we chose to just do comfort care instead of continuing with the chemo and radiation. And then once we chose that, he was only on hospice for 4 days before he passed. So, and that was in March of 25.
If somebody was listening to this right now and is going through something like this, like what advice or what were some of the things that help you get through this time?
It was, I think, just taking in every moment that we had, even as hard as it was to like watch him go through what he was going through. It was an honor to be able to take care of him in that time. I know that like he would have done it for me in a heartbeat. And I told my older kids, like, it's a good lesson in like, you don't marry somebody unless you're willing to change diapers and feed them and give medications around the clock and hold their hand while they are literally fighting for their life, because it is hard to watch somebody you love go through something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and also take care of a toddler who does not understand why their dad, who was so full of life, can't talk. She would say, like, why isn't Dada talking to me?
Mhm.
Why isn't, she would ask him to like put on her shoes and he like physically couldn't do it. And that was so hard for her because she didn't understand like why he couldn't do it. And like navigating her grief like on top of my own and, going through it in like real time. Um, there's always that like question, like, is it better to like have somebody die suddenly or like watch them die? Like, there's no right answer because like
Right.
we went through it, we watched him go through it, and like it was hard to like watch somebody so like healthy and like full of life lose that. And there was moments of clarity. Like I said, I think there was like a blessing in disguise that he didn't understand what was
Mhm.
happening because I don't think that like I truly don't think his heart could have handled knowing like how much in pain that we were all in because there was nothing he wanted more than for like all of us to be happy. Like everything he did like was for all of us. And so I don't think that he could have handled it. Um I think it would have been he wouldn't have cared for himself properly like if he knew how much it was hurting us.
Yeah.
But there was moments of clarity. Like a couple days before he passed, he said to me, like, he hopes that I knew how much he loved me and that how much he was going to miss me, and that for me not to be jealous that he was going to get to be with our boys.
Mm.
So like there was moments where he like understood what was happening. But
Man.
yeah, it was a lot. But I think I was, given the nature of my job, I was able to spend every minute with him and I was able to be there with him, and be the one that got to take care of him. We didn't have to, he didn't have to go to a rehab or, I got to be there in the hospital with him and I got to be here at home and take care of him. And so I'm grateful for that, as hard as it was.
You at least got
I,
to spend that time with him before.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've been through a ton of grief. Like my heart, like I just get chills listening to your story and knowing what you've been through. How has life, like, is your perception of life different now?
Oh, yeah.
And like what, because I think where my head and my heart sit right now is, we are constantly in human nature complaining about things, right? Like this sucks about this or this sucks about that. And, sometimes we take for granted our health or our relationships and things like that. So I guess my question is if somebody is listening to this and it feels that way, as somebody who's gone through such, traumatic grief, what are some like takeaways that you could give us that would help us just look at life in a different light?
I since Curtis has passed, the way that I see things now is that we always think that we have time and we don't. And there were so many things that we wanted to do or thought that we had time to do or plans that we wanted to make. And even simple things like returning a phone call or planning a barbecue with friends or things like that. There's always things that you think you have time for because other things take your time first and you just don't know. Um, and so this last year, I've really focused on just saying yes as much as possible. And I understand, like, we have to pay our bills. We have to, you know, everybody has to work. We live in Sonoma County where the cost of things are
Insane.
astronomical. Um, but we only get one life and we don't know when that invisible clock is going to run out. And so you have to make time for people and for things that are important to you. And I am not wasting any more time worrying about, things that aren't necessarily important. And like, yes, I need to make sure that I have money to pay all my bills, but I'm also not stressing out about like eating at a restaurant that costs a little bit more money, or buying Addie something that, is frivolous or whatnot, because I want to enjoy the life that we have here. And we're not going to take it with us, that we can't take anything with us. And so we're going to enjoy the time that we have and make those memories. And we did a lot of traveling this last year. Saw a lot of friends that we've been meaning to see, went places that we've been wanting to go. And also not stressing out about things that aren't really important. Kurtis was never bothered. I used to say he was the calm to my storm, because everything to me was always an emergency, always. And he was never bothered by anything. And the ironic thing is that they say that glioblastoma, brain cancer, is caused by a shift in your DNA. And a shift in your DNA is caused by stress, which is funny to me because he was never stressed. And I'm the one who is always stressed. And so I have been trying, which isn't going that well for me, but trying to be less stressed by things, and just live more like he did, like less bothered by things that aren't as important. But I feel that, like, more of us need to say yes to more things. And I think it's harder to do when you haven't been impacted by such hard things. And I used to tell him, ironically, all the time too, like he took his job very seriously, which is not a bad thing. But one of the things that had impacted me a lot from his death too is that we received a termination email the night he died from his corporate office. Like, they couldn't even wait till the next day. Like, they closed out his employee ID and all of that the day he died. And it's like, it just goes to show, like, it wasn't like, his coworkers, I'm sure, miss him. Like, I'm sure they know he did a good job, but it just goes to show, like, you're just a number. And like, you spend your whole life dedicated, 22 years dedicated to a company, and I get that email that the day he dies, like, and that still bothers me,
Yeah.
like,
It puts
so
a perspective that you give so much to other people or to a job or to a company for them to just do something like that. And you're like,
yeah,
what was all that for? What was all the
yeah.
stress for? What was all those endless hours for?
Hmm.
Huh.
And like that morning, he was like, I can't go to the doctor. They need me there. You know what I mean? And like, you just dedicate so much of yourself, and then you're gone and they move on.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's a hard reality, but it's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
Like, especially in a big corporate company. Like, and it's not anything against a person. Like, he was a good person. He was a hard worker, but like, companies still have to keep moving forward.
Yep.
But but your family is the one who misses out on the time, and misses out on, the memories and everything else. And so I think if I had a piece of advice to give to people who are like that, or like him in that aspect, like, they will just move on, but your family is the one who it will be missing something in
Mm.
someone.
It's such a great reminder for sure. I know we just had this conversation the other day about just being able to like own your own business or to do your own thing, and like how much freedom there is behind that, to be able to like
Mhm.
pick up your kids from school. And yes, it's stressful, but there's like so many more benefits to doing your own
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing that. I know that obviously that's super triggering for you, and I appreciate you, being open and honest about it, because I do think I know a lot of people right now that are struggling with a spouse or a friend who's battling cancer. And so um I guess my last question before we move that conversation is, as somebody who was in it, the thick of it, any advice for the people outside of in your community or your friends or your family of ways to support, you know, a situation like that and a hard time like that, how we as our community can support them?
Yeah, my number one tip is to just show up.
Mm.
I think that the hardest thing is sometimes you feel like you don't know what to say or don't know what to do, and so you do nothing. And that makes people feel like you don't care. And
Mm.
even though that's 99.9% of the time not the case, when you say nothing and do nothing, that is hard. And so sometimes even saying, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to do, but I'm here for you, or I'm thinking about you, or I love you, goes a long way. Because when you do nothing or say nothing, that's hurtful. And so even just saying that you don't know what to do or say makes a big difference. And when somebody is in the midst of the thing, they don't know what they need.
Mhm.
And so asking them to make another decision is really overwhelming. So saying like, let me know if you need something isn't isn't helpful.
Mhm.
And so if you know somebody loves coffee, just drop it off on their doorstep or send DoorDash with a coffee or a meal or whatnot, because when you're in the thick of it, you can't make those decisions. And I I feel like that goes for when they lose somebody, lose a child, lose a spouse in the thick of postpartum, in the thick of dealing with a cancer diagnosis. Just send whatever it is. Send a card, send the coffee, send the sandwich, because asking somebody to make another decision can be so overwhelming because they don't know what they need.
Mm.
They can't even think clearly, and so having to think about anything else feels too overwhelming, and they're not going to ask for the help, and it just feels like one more task on their plate.
Mm. Such a good reminder. Thank you for that. So you've gone through an incredible weight loss journey. How much weight have you lost?
Over 200 pounds.
Like insane. Like insane. What was like the point for you and how long have you been on this journey?
Since October of 2023.
Okay.
So I
Almost it'll be 3 years this year.
Yeah. So in October of 2023, I started taking semaglutide, a GLP-1, and I still am taking that. I am doing it for maintenance now. And the question I always get is, why am I still taking the GLP when am not wanting to lose any more weight? And the short answer for that is I am doing it for the food noise. My biggest issue is that I have the uncontrollable food noise. And I would not stop taking my medication for my thyroid. I would not stop taking the medication for my anxiety. And so, as long as I can, I will continue to take the GLP for the food noise. I work very closely with my doctors. I get my labs drawn regularly just to make sure that everything is in line, and I stay on the GLP to manage that as well.
So obviously you're a supporter of it. I think it was one of my last few episodes of the last season. I had someone on who also went through that journey, but also like created an app around it. But I learned a lot about it because I think there's a lot of stigma behind it. Everyone's like, oh, you can just take a shot and then, lose this weight or how you're going to have to continue taking this medication for the rest of your life also to put like there were so much things, but the one thing that I took away from that conversation was the food noise, and I'm like, oh, that's like really a thing. And then the more that I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm constantly, what's for dinner, what am I having for lunch, oh, we're going out to dinner, let me look at the menu. I'm like constantly like thinking about food, and I'd never
Yeah.
even thought of it. So for me that was like a huge wake up call for like why people take it.
Yeah. So unless you deal with that, it's not something people even realize.
Right.
And people are like, oh, well, just, don't think about it or just count calories or macros. Well, that makes it worse.
Right.
Because when you battle with food noise and you do something like count calories, then you're constantly thinking about that even more so. What am I going to eat? How many calories is that? How many, then it gets even more constant. And so one of the things for me with this journey is has no moral value. Food is not good or bad. Food is just food. It's supposed to be meant for just fuel. And one of the things that I've been able to do this time around is that I've been able to use it that way, which I've never been able to do before, because I've done lots and lots of diets before. And I've lost weight before. I've lost a significant amount of weight before. But it's consumed every part of my life. And it's been extreme because the noise has been constant, and it's been, what can I eat? When can I eat? How much can I eat? Weighing and measuring, and where can I go? And it would be like, people would ask, well, what can you have? Now I can have whatever I want, however, like when I want, if I want something, or if I don't want something. When I'm full, I know when I'm full and when I'm hungry, which has never been a thing before. And honestly, I feel like if it wasn't for the tool of the GLP, I would have probably put on the weight that I lost when Kurtis was sick and when he had passed, because food has always been an emotional thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Totally. How do you feel your mental state is now that you've lost weight? Like, do you feel like a whole new person? I mean, like what? Because I know,
I
because I know, like especially when we're a little heavier, like we have all these thoughts about ourselves, right? Like, how has your mindset changed since taking it?
I do, and I also think, going back just really quickly, if I can, to
Yeah.
Kurtis, I also feel like if I hadn't have lost the weight, I would not have been able to care for him like I did.
Mm,
And so I would not have been able to lift him. He was tall and big, and I would not have been able to push him in the wheelchair like I was. I would not have been able to get him in and out of bed and move him
mm,
to change the briefs, and to get him into the shower and out of the shower and do all of those things at 300 pounds. There would have been no way I would have been able to physically care for him like I needed to when I was
yeah.
heavy.
I didn't even think about that.
So it, that needed to happen in order for me to be able to physically care for him.
Hmm.
So I I used to be one of those people who said everything happens for a reason. I don't necessarily believe that now.
Mm,
There's been too many shitty things that have happened. I think that sometimes bad things just happen. But I do think that you can find meaning and find positive things that happen from those shitty things. One of those examples that I've given recently is that our son Asher lived 18 days in the NICU before he died. And that was just a really shitty thing. He had a very rare genetic disease that not a lot of people have had. There's only been a handful of cases worldwide. It's just one of those freak things that happened. Kurtis and I weren't carriers. It just one of those really bad luck of the draw things. He was on ECMO, the highest form of life support, which led Kurtis and I to have some really tough conversations about life support and end of life care and things like that that normal people in their late 30s and early 40s don't have,
right.
especially when they're that young. People just don't have those conversations. And Kurtis and I had a lot of those conversations about, like, what would happen if we were in a coma? What would happen if this or that? Like, what we would want. And like, normal people just don't have those kind of conversations, especially when they're so young. And we had a lot of those conversations while Asher was sick and after Asher had passed. So when Kurtis got sick and his short-term memory was gone, and we went and I had to make decisions for him on what kind of care he was going to have, I knew exactly what he would want because we had those conversations. And if Asher hadn't have been sick, and if we didn't go through that with Asher, I might not have known exactly what he wanted. We were together for a long time, so I knew generally what he would choose, but I knew exactly what to do for him because we had those conversations, which we might not have had yet because we were still so young. But because we had been through that together, I knew exactly what to do. And now I still am like, did I do the right thing? Because it's just human nature. But I know that I did. And I know that he would have wanted me to try with the chemo and radiation, even though we know it was a Hail Mary. I knew he would have wanted me to try. And I know that he wanted me to stop when we did. So I know that I made the right choice,
Yes, you did.
even though sometimes I still question it, but if we wouldn't have went through what we went through with Asher, we might not have had that conversation yet. Because usually people wait until they're later in life to have those kinds of tough conversations, which is another good reminder to have those conversations because you just don't know.
Hmm. But nobody wants to have them, right? It's that uncomfortable
No.
conversation. Nobody wants to think of that. But how much more set up for success would you be if you had that conversation?
Yeah. And it is uncomfortable, and you
Yeah.
don't want to have those conversations. But again, we aren't promised tomorrow.
Yeah. Such a great reminder. Christina, what's life like now for you? And I mean, obviously, I'm sure you have good and bad days. But like, what is life like now with you and your daughter?
So we are trying to just live in the moment, enjoy life as much as we can. Um, she misses her dad quite a bit. I mean, we all do. Um, we try to keep his memory alive as much as we can. We are so grateful that I have the job that I do because we have documented so much of our life.
Mm.
Um, and so we have so many videos and photos, and Kurtis was such a great dad, that we have, he read to her every night, and we have all of that. He would just record. It's almost like he knew, but he didn't know, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like he
Yeah.
would read to her and he would just set up the camera and record himself reading to her. And so we have on her like Yodo box him reading to her so he can read her bedtime stories still.
Mm.
And so she's only 4, but she still, she talks about him, and we try to keep his memory alive as much as we can. Um, and her and I just try to enjoy life as much as we can and make those memories and do things that he enjoyed. We still try to keep the family dinner with the big kids and things that were important to all of us. And say yes as much as possible and
That was
travel
going to be
and
my last question for you is what is that one thing that the one takeaway? I mean, you've given us so many takeaways. Like there's so many things that I'm just like, yeah, well, like just put in perspective things. But what's like the one thing that you think someone needs to hear from this conversation today?
just say yes as much as possible.
Yeah.
Enjoy the time that you do have. But that's been my biggest takeaway from all of this is just say yes as much as possible.
Mhm. Christina, thank you. Thank you for again being open to the conversation. I know you are going to help so many people that are going through a situation like this, or even listening to this story, and if that happens to them, right? Like how they can manage it, or even just have a resource to reach out to. I think that's the other thing is like building this community of women who have gone through hard things and be like, shit, I'm going through this too. Who can I reach out to get support from or get advice from? So I just want to thank you for sharing your story. Again, I love watching you and all the things that you're doing. You look incredible. And I'm just so honored to have you here today.
Thank you.